Welcome to Inside Carbondale. This is the podcast that brings you the latest information about projects and events going on in Carbondale. I'm Amy Fox, the Public Relations Officer for the City of Carbondale, and I'm joined by Robert Ketter, the Market Manager at North Star Destination Strategies. And in April, we talked with him when the city kicked off its community-wide branding project. Throughout the last several months, there's been a lot of progress on this project. Robert, what's been going on behind the scenes since we last checked in?
Yeah, so, back in April, as you were saying, we had a wonderful visit here to Carbondale and got to speak with a great number of folks in focus groups and one-on-one interviews, in restaurants and coffee shops, just trying to get that internal, what folks here that live in Carbondale say about the place, how they feel about it, how they think about it. Since then, we have been just collecting an enormous amount of data, both quantitative and qualitative, external and internal. So some folks listening to this podcast may have taken the community-wide survey that was available earlier this summer. That was certainly one research tool that we used. We conducted a large survey in a few markets outside of Carbondale to get at those external perceptions. Been calling upon professionals in economic development and tourism, site selection, regional commissions and such all across the state of Illinois, Western Kentucky, Southeast Missouri. I think, we tallied it up at one point, and I want to say that when you add up the various numbers of people that we've talked to through surveys or phone calls or whatever it may be, that I think we were approaching about 1,000 conversations if we haven't crossed that. That's been really the bulk of it, just collecting all that data.
Why is the research so important when developing this community-wide brand?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, right? Because we may have very well talked about this in our episode back in April, but branding. When you say the word branding, many people automatically think of just a logo, a tagline sometimes, but just those foundational creative elements that, again, people often associate with branding. But at North Star, we think it's really important that that the people who live in these communities feel that what they're seeing, whether it is a logo or reading a tagline or reading a brand narrative or the color palette of the logo itself, that it feel authentic, that it feel true to the people who are supposed to be owning this brand, to the people who are supposed to be ambassadors of this brand. And so, certainly doing the research is important for us to be able to make, in a funny way, to be able to make objective decisions about a subjective matter like creativity. We always have that research to fall back upon to justify and rationalize our decisions moving forward with the creative phase of this process. But again, kind of getting back to the folks that live here in Carbondale, being able to conduct this research and them being able to participate in it is an essential part in getting that buy-in and making them feel like they were part of the process, and so that this isn't just a brand that the city has decided upon from on high, and now everyone in the community is supposed to just accept it. People were a part of this, and that's important.
You mentioned research wrapping up in July. What do you do with all of the data? Because that's certainly a lot of information.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is an absolutely enormous amount of information across all the different research tools that we conducted. What we do with all that data is essentially, we first analyze it. We'll cross-tabulate across different markets and different demographics and, just slice up the data in all these different kinds of ways to look at it from all these different angles to, at the end of the day, glean a range of insights from the data. So at the end of the day, what you want to get from this research and all this data and information is a story. And that story that we've been looking for, that I think we found, is what is distinct, unique, and ownable for the city of Carbondale, the community of Carbondale. And so, like you said, we wrapped up the collection of the data and the research in July, and ever since then, we've been just studying it and gleaning those insights that led us to a strategy, a brand DNA for the city.
And what did you learn from all of the research? Are there a couple of points that really stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. one of the first things that stands out to me is that this community has a lot of assets to work with, which is great. Some communities just the fact is they are not as wealthy in assets to talk about and to promote and be proud of. And they have to work on creating those or attracting them, developing them. In Carbondale, you have such a number of things, whether it is, having a 4-year higher education institution in your community is huge. Having the local restaurant scene that you do, unique dining options, people talked about that a lot. The diversity that exists here in the community, that was something that came up both internally. Folks here in Carbondale were proud of it, but people outside of Carbondale definitely noted it too, and it was something that a lot of people talked about, the connection with nature, and that you have a national forest in your backyard. I mean, these are, if you live here in Carbondale, I'm sure you think to yourself, oh, well, it's the Shawnee National Forest. Doesn't everyone have something like this? But the truth of the matter is a lot of people don't. A lot of communities don't. And it was something that people, especially outside of Carbondale, talked about a lot as something they wish they had.
Was there anything that was surprising or caught you off guard about this research as you began to analyze it?
My answer to that isn't necessarily surprising, just because it does happen in a lot of communities, but I think it's a valuable takeaway that, for the most part, people in Carbondale are a lot tougher on themselves or harder on themselves than folks outside of Carbondale. The data really across the board, when it came to people outside of Carbondale, had a lot of fond, really nice things to say about the community. Again, just going back to the assets that you have, the local businesses, the diversity, the connection and access to nature and outdoor recreation and higher learning. People outside of Carbondale recognize that and associate you with all those things. And folks in Carbondale are, just... And it's a natural thing, where the grass is always greener on the other side, and whenever we talk about our hometowns, for some reason we can sometimes be self-conscious or something like that. But so, really, I think a great takeaway for residents of Carbondale would be that there's a lot of reason to be proud of being from here and living here.
Where are we at in this process? It seems like it's been pretty long. We began it back really this spring.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at now, and kind of what are the next steps?
Absolutely, yeah. So now with the conclusion of the collection of data and research and the recommendation of the strategy to the City Council, once that is approved, we will move on into the creative portion of this initiative, which, again, getting back to what I said a moment ago, is what most people associate branding with. Mm-hmm. We'll start working through the development of taglines, of logos, of a color palette for the community, of custom creative deliverables that we will collaborate with the city to decide what those deliverables are. We will write up an action plan for the city of Carbondale, our thoughts on how to best roll this brand out once we have completed our work. It's kind of like a roadmap of, these are just kind of best practices on how to make this brand, kind of take it off the page, make it a three-dimensional thing that people not only see on their stationery, but also weave into their events and their celebrations, weave it into the infrastructure and policy. So, yeah, that is where we are right now.
And one question I get time and time again is, when can we expect to see this finished product?
Absolutely, yeah. So, thank you so very much, Carbondale, for your patience, after all. But, we want to make sure that we're doing the job right. And so, we definitely like to be methodical during the research and strategy process. To answer your question about when we can expect reasonably to have this latter portion of the initiative done, the creativity in action, I think it's safe to assume that we could have this done sometime in the winter, this winter coming up.
Perfect. And is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know? Anything else I forgot to ask you? No, the questions were wonderful, so thank you for that, Amy. But again, I think I would just go back to, if you're someone here in Carbondale,
be proud of the community that you live in and you call home, because there's really so many wonderful things here. It's great that the city of Carbondale is pursuing this kind of initiative in this day and age, where consumers are so bogged down with content always being thrown at them. It's important for communities to have a distinct brand that can kind of break through that noise and speak to potential visitors, potential new residents, potential investment, a brand and message and story that stands out from the pack. That's what you want, and that is definitely what Carbondale is doing here in pursuing an initiative like this. So I just, like I said, if you live here, I would encourage you to, look over the research and the strategy. I think you'll find it interesting, and I think it'll reaffirm that idea of be proud of where you are. And again, I think it's great that the city is pursuing this, because I think it'll, at the end of the day, make it that much more competitive in the marketplace and build on this wonderful momentum that you guys certainly have after the eclipse.
We're certainly looking forward to the finished product. Thanks so much for joining us, Robert, and making the trip from Nashville.
Absolutely. Always glad to be here.
And we hope all of you will join us next time for another episode of Inside Carbondale. Have a great day. If you have feedback or have ideas for future podcasts, feel free to email me at afox@explorecarbondale.com.